Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for another very special edition of WOWSA Live with our host, Ned Denison. Ned?
Oh, hello, everybody. I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We have our guest today, Drury Gallagher, who's almost unique. There's only one other person who's an honoree of both the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame and the International Masters Swimming Hall of Fame. Drury is an accomplished master swimmer. We'll get into that in a minute. He also at one point held the speed record around Manhattan. But what he's best known for in our sport is he's really the man who popularized the Manhattan swim. So we'll get into that all in a minute. Drury, say hello to everybody, please.
It's a pleasure to be here and to be at my age, 83, to still be swimming, but not as competitively as I'd like to, with my right shoulder pretty well shot. And the doctor says, you're not supposed to be able to move that arm over your head. I said, but I'm swimming in a horizontal position. I'm not swimming in a vertical position. So I am able to do that and work the left arm a little harder than the right.
Tell us about your early swimming history, kind of before 1980. How did you learn how to swim? What kind of competitions, university, masters, and how much open water swimming did you do before that famous Manhattan swim of yours?
Not much of it, but going back to the childhood days when we learned how to swim, our mentor and teacher was a gentleman by the name of Joseph A. Ruddy, who was a member of the International Water Polo Hall of Fame. Family had a history of tremendous activity in swimming, setting world records. His son, Ray Ruddy, there were 5 kids. I believe it was 2 girls and 3 boys. They were internationally distant swimmers also. Joe, I guess in his later years, we sort of adopted him as a grandfather. And he was down in the Rockaway area. We lived a block from the ocean. It was Long Island, the western tip of Long Island, not the eastern tip at the Hamptons, but just maybe 4 miles from the tip of the western end of Long Island. And that's basically where I learned how to swim, was first with Joe Ruddy, who in his retirement years, opened up the doors for the youngsters in the Rockaway area. Tommy Hetzel learned from Joe. Tommy Hetzel, as we all know, had done about 8 or 9 crossings of the English Channel, and it was in his blood. Tommy was sort of a mentor to me, as well as Joe Ruddy. And basically that gave me the foundation to love the water. And my training in the early days was basically from maybe 8 years old to about 14 was just riding waves daily. We had no surfboards. It was just body surfing, and we'd spend 3, 4, 5 hours in the water riding waves. That's how we grew up. We didn't have a pool in the area. When I went to high school, which was Brooklyn Prep Jesuit school, they didn't have a pool. We had to go over to a little place that had a 20-yard pool. And then we also swam at the Brooklyn Central Y under Henry Fear, who was a fabulous coacher that taught us early on. I was able to go out for all the other sports in high school, football, but the problem was I only weighed 100 pounds. And I was about 5'2". Football coach kept me till the last cut in freshman year. And he said, Gallagher, I got to cut you because you're too light. And if you get hit by a 200-pound kid, he'll murder you. I said, no way, he won't catch me. So I was too short for basketball, which I played early on in YO, midget, and Tyro and junior. But I was sitting on the bench because all the tall guys got to play. And same thing with baseball. I went out for the baseball team. However, the coach of the swimming team was the baseball coach also. And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm going to be a pitcher." "No, you're not. You're going to swim." So my rejections was swimming. And I had a love for it. And I did extremely well in high school. Achieving, I believe it was All-American status and opportunity to go to a few of the choice schools. And I had picked not a swimming school, but a school which gave us an opportunity in New York to try to build a team there. And we had 2 All-Americans that I knew from high school go there. And I decided I'd go to Fordham, and the administration at that time had just dropped football, and they were a dynamite team with Lombardi and all of the famous 7 horsemen, whatever it was. So we sort of worked a deal out where they would give us about 10 scholarships to work with and keep the kids that swam in the area, high schools, to sort of stay in the area, and would give them partial scholarships. That fell through in sophomore year when they reneged on it. And here I am swimming against the boys from Yale and so forth. And Tippett had also wanted me to go to Yale. And I realized the mistake that I made, even though I was beating his fellas in the league and so forth. In junior year, after accomplishing certain things in college, he asked me to come up and train with he and the group that was being selected for the Pan Am Games in '59. And that's when I realized the mistake that I had made by not going there. But he did want me to take a year and go to prep school to build up my body, to put on some weight. I eventually wound up at about 5'10", 160, 150. That was my fighting weight. So that's a little history about my background. Did well at Fordham, but, didn't really accomplish the goal and so forth that I should have. I didn't have any real training through high school and college. I figured after college, I did a small stint in the Navy, 6 months active, about 7.5 years reserve. And the opportunity was just to swim for a short time. When I figured my career was finished, and got married a couple of years later, had about 4 or 5 kids very quickly, wound up with 5, and was introduced to the master's swimming program when I was about 33. And that's when I started my swimming career, training and so forth. And when I was able to accomplish in school, high school and college. That's a little history. And it took me about 7 years until I was able to accomplish success with the Masters. I was swimming with the New York Athletic Club, and they had contacted me about representing them. And they called me up and said, "Gallagher, we want you back swimming." I said, "What are you kidding?" I said, "I'm running 2 businesses. I got 5 kids. What are you talking about?" They said, "Oh, the Masters program just started around that time in the early 70s. So I went to it, but it took me 7 years before I won a national title. A Taste of Blood, and it's all history from there. I was swimming faster than I was in high school and college. And I sort of got a taste for it, and I loved it. And doing it, but not as active.
Thank you for that. Let me bring you to the Manhattan Swims. Did you have any knowledge of Diane Struble's 1959 swim? Did you read about it in the paper? Did you go and watch it? Did it appear in your life at all?
Not at all.
How about Diana Nyad's 1975 swim?
I was aware of that, yes. But I didn't know the lady. I believe I met her once or twice as we were setting up the Manhattan Island Marathon swim.
Did it inspire you at the time? Did you think about it? Did it plant a seed, or was it just something that passed by?
Well, I have to go back to Tom Hetzel and what he accomplished with his channel crossings. I believe there was a total of 8. Tom was not a very fast swimmer, but he had the ability to just swim the distance at his pace. And I remember as kids, we used to swim off the beach in the Rockaways on Long Island, and would do about 20 beaches or something like that together. And that was many years ago. Tommy had passed away several years back, and I was always in touch with Tom over the years. And I had a call after he passed away. His sons called me, and they told me what had happened. And several years later, they called me again, and they said, we're going to have a service down at the beach. And Tom's request was always to have my ashes thrown into the sea. And we did it, and that's my good friend.
And tell us about how you came to do that first swim around Manhattan, and the involvement of people like Tom.
Around 1980, I lost a son in an accident, 17 years old. And Tommy, as therapy, said, Drury, you got to swim around Manhattan with me. I said, Tom, I'll go with you in the boat. I'll watch you. And it was a hot July day. And that was my first trip around the Manhattan Island in a boat. At that time, we started at 96th Street in New York City, East Side. And we went into the area, Hell's Gate, as they call it. And that's between the East River and the Harlem River. So that was the starting point. And I got a little knowledge of really what it was all about, watching him do the first swim. And after that summer, Tom and I would talk, and he said, you have to do it. I said, Tom, I have no reason to. I'm not a distance swimmer. I love the water. So we talked that winter, and he kept calling me. I said, and I had to figure out something to get rid of him. So I said, here's what we'll do, Tom. I said, several things. We'll set up an organization, basically similar to the English Channel Federation. And I'd like to propose that we do a memorial swim every year. My son. And then I said, we'll get some other charities involved and so forth. I said, you're going to be the president, and I'll be the vice president, and we'll organize the Manhattan Island Swimming Marathon. And that was how it started. And And I'm glad it happened that way. It was wonderful. So the first thing we did was that memorial swim, and we worked with Tim Johnson, whom you know, to help us plan everything with regard to the tides of the three rivers, the Harlem River, the Hudson River, and the East River, and also to coordinate the timing when you had a full moon and take advantage of the higher and lower tides and the faster movement of the currents. Timmy was, and Dr. John Powers, who was very close to Tom Hetzel, who's still with us, good friend down in the Rockaway still. He's about 88 now. So we had a lot of help from a lot of people that wanted to be involved. And the purpose, Tommy said, and I said, will also go for the record. And I believe that was the Diana Nyad record.
It was. Yes.
And that was the timing of it. But I said, Tom, and Tim Johnson said, Tom is going to, a slower swimmer, so he's going to have to go ahead for maybe 2.5, 3 hours. And then you're going to start and catch the end of the tide moving up, which will be a little faster, the Harlem River going north, and out through Spuyten Duyvil into the Hudson. That's a track of about 7 miles into the Hudson, which is about, I'd say about 13, 14 miles, where you have the top and finishing up the Harlem and catching the tide down to the Hudson going south. And then coming to the East River. Now, at that point in time, not having been a marathon swimmer, I guess you hit the wall. And I don't know how or why, but I was ready to quit. Tommy was still ahead of me, and he was just maybe half a mile up to the river. So I, instead of quitting, said to my son, I said, I need your help. I said, let's swim the next 200 strokes. I sort of traded off of that. Then I did the next 200 strokes. And then he did the next 200. And that's what got me through the wall. Tommy and I caught up to him just under the Brooklyn Bridge. And Tommy and I, for a few moments, we stopped, we chatted, and he says, go for the record. So the rest is history. The swim up the East River, which is about 7 miles. And I believe the time was about 7 hours and 16 minutes in that area.
We have you at 6:42.
Huh?
We have
That
you
was
at
the second
6:42.
That was the
Oh,
second
okay.
swim.
Sorry.
You thought I only had one swim, right?
I don't know. I'll check the records. What kind of training did you do, Drury, to do that first Manhattan swim? Because you were a pool guy, not a distance guy.
That's true. Well, I had my experience off the Rockaway coast for years. So that was my taste of salt water. But no real open water swimming. After the swim, I guess everybody else was exhausted because it was a beautiful day, sun was shining, and my energy was like at an all-time high at that time. So we went out to celebrate. Everybody else was falling asleep. We had a nice party after it and so forth. So that was the initial swim. There was also the initial swim as a marathon swim. We had 12 swimmers that started, including Janie Katz and so forth. And Dave Horning from California, who was heavily involved in distance swimming as well as Ironman swims and so forth out in California. He was the winner that year. He was battling, I don't have all the details, but one of the swimmers out west, from out west. And that was the initial swim that we had to set up the first year of marathon.
Are you surprised at how popular it's become?
No. With an ideal setting. 3 rivers. I was to do a second swim the following year, but we kept the annual going. Paul Asmuth came in that year. And, you know, it was a learning experience we were going through with the tides and the moons and everything else involved. The timing, the weather, the boating, very active 3 rivers. We had safety precautions that we had to take. Everybody had a boat, and then subsequently had to have a boat with a kayak and so forth. But you could never really get up to the major numbers because of the safety and the concerns and so forth. During that period, you might recall that the New York City Marathon run was started several years before that. They were going through a learning experience, and I had meetings with some of the mayors and the other people that were involved with the park department, just to get them involved also, which we did over the years. And we had several charities that we were raising money for to basically help us cover the expenses. A few sponsors you get and some other people that were able to help. The second swim that I did was shortly after Paul swam. And he brought the record down to, I think it was 6:48 and 6 hours and 48 minutes. And the advice, as best we could know, was that you have to wait another 2 to 2.5 hours to catch the right tide. And I believe the people that he had with him were advising him to go early. And I said, from what Timmy Johnson had said and Dr. Powers, they said, no, you're going to have a problem. So he started out too early, had a very fast swim up the Harlem River, very fast down the East River, and he was going to just take a couple hours off the swim. But when he got to the East River, the tide was going against him. You cannot swim against a 4 or 5 mile tide. So he basically was stalled, and you're just swimming in and out of the little piers that are there, just grabbing every inch you could. and he did break the record. And that was the 6:48. A week or two later, I went in, and I may swim 19-minute miles. He probably would be swimming 16-minute miles or faster. And when you don't have the optimum tide, you can't do it. And I believe the time was 6:42 that I had done. And it's the timing of the tides, moon. So that's a little history. I think, well, it was a wonderful start.
Steve, you were in the 1984 race, coming second to Paul Asmuth and just ahead of Shelley. What are your memories of that year, Steve?
Actually, it was a year later. I think it was in 82. I'd have to check the records or send you some of the background also with the reports and the papers and so forth, which I can do if you'd like.
Yeah.
Your record was in 83.
Okay. So the swim started in 82. Paul came in. I said, Paul, you got the record. This is what you have to do. And it was a learning experience. We didn't really know the answers. His group didn't know the answers. It was just, let's see what happens. But that's, who knows?
Yeah. Drury, after Paul had set the record, he came back in 1984 with Shelley Taylor Smith from Australia, and I also joined in the group there, and
right.
It was a great race. I remember taking a public bus to the start, getting lost because I didn't really know Manhattan at the time. I was met there by a professor who was doing some graduate work in the city. And I told him, oh, just sit on the boat, and when I need some food, just give it to me. And he says, great, I've never been on a Circle Line tour. How long does this take? I said, oh, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 hours. And he said, oh, you didn't tell me about that. And so we went, but I finished second to Paul, and I remember leading all the way, probably 75, 80% of the race. And Paul, one of the greatest marathon swimmers of all time.
That he is.
He would just toying with me. I mean, it was like a Papa bear slapping around the little baby bear. And I saw him. Yeah, I was enough ahead of him, maybe 25 yards when I finally saw him. At that time, the professor was writing furiously all the notes. So I don't know, I forgot the name of the street, and the fast guy is coming up. And I went over on my back. I looked at Paul, and obviously he is a world champion and winner of numerous
one
records.
of the top.
I said, okay, well, if I do have a chance to ever beat him, this is my chance. And so I started to kick harder and pick up my stroke. And again, Papa Bear is behind me, just bidding his time. And stroke by stroke, he came up, behind me, gently tapped my foot to remind me that I'm here. I probably held him off for another 10 yards or so. And then that was it. He went around me. But I remember very distinctly people just on the shoreline or in boats just staring at us.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just shocked. Again, I'm from Southern California. So swimming around Manhattan to me was, that was just incredible. Just an unbelievable opportunity to see the city from a totally different perspective. And, I got, at those times, we didn't have Google, we didn't have the internet. So first thing I did coming out from JFK was to get a, guide to Manhattan. And I was reading, the Guide to Manhattan, and I tried to memorize the names of the bridges and the buildings and stuff, and I just, but that last section against Paul, I just remember, okay, you just got to hold him off, and that was a fantasy that went in.
Where did he pass you? Up the East River?
Yeah. No. It was down the Hudson. It was probably within the last 20 minutes of the race.
Yes.
Okay,
so you started at the Battery.
Yeah, we started at
downtown.
Battery Park, and then we went up the East River, and then came down the Hudson. And it was a nice day. I remember jumping in, and the water was pleasantly warm. And down the East River, I remember flying past joggers and cyclists, and that made me feel good. And
what a way to see New York!
Yeah, oh, unbelievable. I just kept on saying, are one of these boats going to go in reverse and just hit us? But fortunately, that didn't happen. And then we got out. You were there, and various people were there. I remember going back on a public bus to the hotel, and I must have stunk big time. I'm in the public bus, and it's a little bit crowded. Some guy sits next to me, and he looks at me like a typical New Yorker, and he goes, "You stink." And I go, "Oh, sorry about that. I just swam around Manhattan."
You what?
And he looks at me, and he says, "Oh, you're so full of BS." And I figured, oh, this is so New York. I don't have the energy to get in an argument with a guy on the public bus heading back. I just want to shower and some food. So, Drury, I want to thank you very much. I mean, you, to this day, hundreds of people and thousands more look forward to the event that you and Tom Hetzel put together. And it gives so many people, a dream to seek. And then once you achieve it, memories for a lifetime.
Great experience. I'm sorry.
Drury, going back, what was the biggest surprise you had in organizing the Manhattan Swim? Was it the assistant to the mayor saying you couldn't do it? Was the Coast Guard making it difficult? What was the biggest surprise?
The biggest surprise, I believe, is the worldwide attention that it got, and the international flavor of people coming in from all over the world. They wanted to do that. We couldn't accept many of them because of safety reasons and so forth. And that is one of the problems of trying to organize a major marathon swim. It's got to be done with a small group or individually. You just can't expand it for safety reasons.
Yeah, I think I was born in the late 50s, and as a kid, urban rivers were not a place you went swimming. And for me, there's all sorts of problems in the world, but one of the things that has definitely changed is in the last 30, 40 years, urban rivers have come a long, long way. You see dolphins and seals and people swimming, and it's completely changed. And that water wasn't available in what, the 60s and the 70s. You couldn't do it.
I'll tell you a little story just to add to this. This past summer, we have a second home. I sold my home in Manhattan about a year and a half ago. But we always kept a family home that we were born and raised in. A house, I guess my father was born in 1909. He passed on 2002. He was in his early 90s. Mom was about 89, and they died within 4 months of one another. That was the relationship. A marriage didn't happen, and they raised 8 kids. When they passed on, the 8 kids said, "Well, what do you want to do with the house?" "We'll keep it. If any one of us need a house, as we get older and so forth. And it's here. So that's what we did. I was there this past summer, as I am most summer. But more so because after my wife's passing, we only just a year and a half ago sold the house we had in Long Island. And I have many nieces and nephews, about 28 of them. And right now, the count of all of the grandnieces and grandnephews are in the 60s. And all the kids loved them. Most of the families stayed down there. And 80% of those grandnieces and grandnephews are at the tip of Long Island on the west end. And I have some of my grandnieces and nephews, they're phenomenal swimmers. And that's what I'm working on now.
When I have a family reunion, I bring maybe a case of beer. When you have a family reunion, how many kegs do you have to have delivered?
Now, I'll tell you about the waters, how they have cleaned it. As you had mentioned, almost miraculous. So one of my nieces shows me a video of just taken on the iPhone that one of her friends took last week when they were walking the beach. And it was a little video, and there were 3 baby sperm whales in that picture, just for about 10 seconds. And to see that and how the waters not only have cleaned up, about 5-6 years ago, the government and the people that run the city, et cetera, they decided to pass a law to prevent the trawling boats coming in and taking all the small bait. And when we were younger, if we went fishing on a boat or whatever, if you wanted to catch the big game fish, the giant tuna, you name it, swordfish, et cetera, Holland, you had to go 35 miles out to the boat. Or you had to go out to Montauk, 125 miles into the island, and go out there and those Block Island and so forth. That was the big game. The big game now, the giant tuna are within a mile closer to the shoreline. So, and they're rebuilding the jetties, but this time after, which they should have done 50 years ago, put in the rock jetty. Because most of that sweep went down to the western end of the island. And the beach went out almost another mile. So that's a little history about the Rockaways and so forth.
Drury, we're gonna end the interview here. I want to thank you very, very much. There was one thing about Manhattan I wasn't particularly happy with. I breathed to the right, so I actually never technically saw the island. So just a little bit of criticism there. It's I think bilateral breathing is cheating in my book. So
I'll tell you a final story about the Manhattan Island. I was blessed to have great friends from high school. I'm still in touch with a lot of them. Only a small class, about 200. And one of the fellows was an All-American swimmer, Jimmy McCarthy, the fireman. And Jimmy was All-American sprinter, 100. In those days, he was in the 51, 52. So had a large family, and he was in charge of the fire boathouse pier down at the end of the East Hudson River. So I'm swimming along. I'm doing the second swim that I was doing, and all of a sudden I see a guy because I'm breathing to my left there. And I said, I know who that is. So Jimmy comes swimming out, starts swimming along with me. We swim about 200-300 yards, and all of a sudden we stop. And I said, Jimmy. He says, Drury, what are you doing in my pool? That is a true story. that's the character that Jimmy McCarthy was.
Fantastic. Again, thank you very, very much, Jerry.
Thank you for having me, and I'm glad to be a part of this great organization of swimming. God
Thank you.
bless.